lot has been said about the democratising power of crowdfunding. It's been said to be ushering in new and empowering democratic models, but it remains misunderstood and understudied, according to McNally and others. Securing lots of small investors to fund a venture isn't new. It's the basis of our stock market. Thousands of small investors come together, buy into a company to help fund it. Fleming and Sorenson point out that charities have always relied on thousands of small donors coming together to support their cause. What's new are the online crowdfunding platforms that seek to connect those who are looking for funds with thousands of potential small investors, each of whom provides just a small part of the funding required. And this is where the argument for crowdfunding's democratising potential really kicks in. Mollick and Robb argue that the decisions about which innovations get commercialised has been largely undemocratic. Small groups of experts decide which gets supported, and access to funding is restricted for many other people. Mollick and Robb say that crowdfunding offers something that other funding models don't, a way to democratise access to capital. Their study of arts funding showed that the crowd was willing to fund projects that the experts were not, and the crowd increased the amount of high-quality funded works compared with the expert system. The crowd lowered the barrier to entry while keeping quality high. Mollick and Robb rightly argue that crowdfunding platforms give a voice to those who would not normally be able to seek funding or to provide it, and it removes potentially inefficient and biased intermediaries. And crowdfunding is growing. Mass Solution is a research firm specialising in crowdfunding. It collected data on 1,250 online crowdfunding platforms for its recent crowdfunding industry report. It says that crowdfunding is growing at an unprecedented rate. Crowdfunding is growing in an environment of, and perhaps because of, increasing dissatisfaction with democracy. Trends in Australian political opinion from the ANU shows 40% of voters are unsatisfied with democracy, and only 12% believe the government is run for the people, rather than for a few big interests. Political experiences overseas suggest a similar sentiment. According to Davies, as crowdfunding evolves, specialist platforms and subgenres are developing. Platforms can be categorised based on the nature of the exchange that they facilitate between project initiators and contributors, and also on the basis of the types of projects that they support. Platforms can facilitate equity-based, debt-based, reward-based or donation-based exchange. Some are geared toward crowdfunding business startups, others to arts projects, some to medical or to charitable causes. Civic crowdfunding is another subgenre. Davies stated in 2015 that civic crowdfunding had not yet been defined by academic researchers. He defined it as the use of crowdfunding for projects that produce community or quasi-public assets, a public good or a common pool resource, projects that provide a community service rather than a consumer product. While Mollick and Robb argue that crowdfunding has democratising power, civic crowdfunding raises some questions. Does it magnify the potential shortcomings of crowdfunding generally? It could. Civic crowdfunding supports projects that might have traditionally been funded by governments. Projects have included a community centre, parks, playgrounds, faster broadband, rubbish and recycling bins, and an old toilet block. Wide reports that a school teacher crowdfunds pencils for her classroom. Davies quotes Brabham, who suggests that financially constrained governments may actually see crowdfunding as incentive not to invest in certain services, assuming that the crowd will be willing to do it. We should not be crowdfunding basic services. The crowdfunding of public assets and community services magnifies issues around barriers to participation, particularly the digital divide and having the financial means to invest. Government decisions are backed, or not, by a one-person, one-vote system. Civic crowdfunding decisions are backed by those who have the dollars, though some may believe our system of government works that way too. ANU's trends in political opinion suggest that that's the case. Perhaps the inefficient intermediaries in this case are the politicians. As Davies states, crowdfunding participants have different levels of agency depending on their ability to pay, and the individual or group with the most resources can exercise greater influence, counter to the notion of democracy and each person having an equal voice. Also, the digital divide and access to crowdfunding technology doesn't support an equal voice. Civic crowdfunding can be used to encourage civic engagement. Galuska and Bistrov suggest that crowdfunding platforms are a special kind of online community. Contributors communicate amongst themselves and with the project initiators.
Government institutions are using it to gain a better understanding of what their communities want, creating another channel of communication with their constituents and giving people a greater voice, albeit within the constraints described earlier. Manchester City Council in the UK is doing that via Spacehive. Spacehive is a UK-based online crowdfunding platform. It facilitates projects focused on public places, spaces and communities. Anyone can create a project or a hive. A hive hosts projects that reflect its focus. Those interested can follow it for project updates. Manchester City Council has created a hive for generating and incubating project ideas in its area amongst its community. It offers part funding for the best projects and is perhaps improving the democratic process. In the world of crowdfunding, and perhaps everywhere else, democracy operates on a spectrum. Some crowdfunding structures and models move us further toward it, and others move us away.